On yesterday's podcast, we talked about the potential downsides of a Kevin Durant trade. Well, today we're going to go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum and talk about why the Raptors should be going all in and doing whatever it takes to get Kevin freaking Durant on the team. And we're going to talk about it with William Liu of the Raptors Show. That's all coming up today. We'll also get some thoughts on the Raptors offseason as a whole. Otto Porter, bringing back Thad Young and Chris Boucher. That's all coming up with Will today on Locked On Raptors. Thanks for being here.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1210 of Locked On Raptors for Wednesday, July the 6th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors, and you can follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast and all your favorite podcast apps for free. We're also on YouTube. You can go subscribe over there, hit the big red subscribe button. It's free to do as well, and it's the best way to support the show. And thanks to all the new folks who have hopped on in the last couple days here. KD is good for business, as it turns out. And no one knows that better than today's guest, who is, of course, William Liu of the Raptors Show. On today's show, Will and I are going to talk about everything going on with KD and sort of the idea that the Raptors should maybe just decide to go all in, the argument in favor of just pulling the trigger on whatever Kevin Durant deal is necessary. We'll get to that in a sec, but first a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Arcade 1UP, and Locked On Raptors is partnering with Arcade 1UP to give away 3 free NBA Jam Shaq Edition machines. That's right, 3 of them are available. They're known for making incredible retro 3/4 scale home arcade games like Pac-Man, Golden Tee, and more. Enter to win at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade1up.com/lockedon for your chance to win one. More on them a little bit later on. And now let's get to it. Will, how's it going, pal? It's been a little while since we chatted. One of the OG guests of the show. It's lovely to have you back.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I don't have a lot of opportunities to talk about the Raptors, so I'm really relishing this chance to talk about the prospect of the Raptors getting Kevin Durant. Yeah,
it's
something I've never talked
territory. About. Yeah,
Yeah.
Something that we've not thought about constantly for 6 days or whatever it's been. I appreciate you coming to hang out. I know, I think you and I both know the daily grind of talking about a thing can get laborious. So it's nice to bring in a pal to talk about the same thing again with. But that's what we're doing. It's Kevin Durant week here on the show. We've got, on Monday we talked about the rising Vegas odds and the sort of different iterations of deals that could work for the Raptors. Yesterday we talked about the argument against trading for KD with Katie Heindel. Tomorrow we got a crossover with Locked On Nets. It's KD week all week here. But today we're going to talk about, like I said, the idea that maybe the Raptors should just pull the trigger on whatever the hell the Nets want and just say, screw it. We're going to go all in and try to get Kevin Durant on the team by any means necessary, which includes Scottie Barnes potentially going out, which includes all of the picks potentially going out. Pascal Siakam would be an emotional hit, I think, for a lot of people. Will, where are you right now in terms of like your desire to see the Raptors just say, screw it, whatever it takes, Brooklyn, let's do it, get Kevin Durant on the Raptors?
Yeah, I mean, like whatever it takes is probably too much. I would say I would very much have a serious conversation with the Nets, and depending on how good the Nets are in negotiating, and also really depending on what the rest of the league is offering at this current moment, then you have to really decide if you're going to do one of those 2 moves that you mentioned, which is to put in Pascal or to put in Scottie. I don't think under any circumstances you put in both of those guys. And obviously between the 2 of those guys, you have a hard decision because Pascal is the more – if you're going to get Kevin Durant, Pascal Siakam is much more immediately available to contribute towards a championship. But obviously Scottie Barnes has much more long-term value. But I think if push came to shove, I think you do include those guys in a conversation for Kevin Durant. And I know that's like heartbreaking to people. It really is. But then again, it's Kevin Durant. I don't understand like the constant like hand wringing over this. It's like people are trying to find them reasons to talk themselves out of Kevin Durant, who is not declining, who is not like, you might say he's injury prone. He's really missed some time. I get it, right? But at the same time, when he plays, He's Kevin Durant, man. Like the argument really. I mean, it could be deeper than that, but it's also not that much deeper than that. Like we're talking about at worst a top 5 all-time scorer, all time.
Yeah.
You know, so like, yeah, let's. I'm not saying like let's do this, but you have to have a really serious conversation if you truly want him, and it's not gonna be some sort of like. I mean, if it is OG plus Gary plus some picks, then of course we're gonna build Masai a shrine. Or I mean, honestly, even if it's a little bit above that, I think we still build him a shrine. But like, I mean, yeah, we're talking about like at worst a top 5 player in the NBA right now, and even if he wants out after a few years, which is kind of a hypothetical that I guess we could discuss. If you're negative about it, you might say, well, Kevin Durant always wants out, whatever. It's like fine. He's on a 4-year contract, so if you do end up trading him, you will recoup like at least. Let's say you trade him 2 years from now, you recoup like 70% of the assets you send getting out. You're not going to get someone as good as Pascal. You're not getting someone as good as Scottie at that point, but you could definitely get a whole bunch of picks and essentially, you're not gonna lose him for nothing unless he retires or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm very much in the bag for Kevin.
I mean, I think it's where Scottie comes in that I start to get a little queasy, just because it is trading off for a potential like 3-year window with KD in exchange for whatever Scottie Barnes' prime can be. And we don't know what it's going to be. Like there's a world in which Scottie Barnes is not what we dream him to be, right? Like there's a world in which he caps out as like a top 20 player or something like that, which is still great. But there's a world in which you look back 5-6 years from now and think, damn, imagine they traded him for Kevin Durant. Like that's on the table. As much as we're all certain Scottie Barnes is going to be incredible, these things are not guaranteed, and becoming one of the 10 best players alive is a very difficult thing to do. I think the reason people don't want to move on from Scottie is because of that potential top 10 status that he probably has if things go accordingly here, but none of that's a sure thing. Kevin Durant is a sure thing. He's really, really, as you said, he's Kevin freaking Durant. Like, it's hard to get around that very clear and obvious fact. So I put up some poll questions yesterday for the Locked On Raptors YouTube people, and just to sort of give the 3 sort of doors that seem to exist. Door number 1 is Scottie is sort of the main piece of the trade, picks whatever. Do you go in on that? 150 votes. 10% of people said yes. 90% of people said no. I actually kind of understand that. Scottie Barnes is pretty incredible. Yeah. Door number 2 was, do you trade Pascal and say like 3 first-rounders for Kevin Durant? It's literally 51-49, like split right down the middle, which I think also makes sense. And then door 3 is, would you trade Gary, Trent Jr., OG, and all the picks for Kevin Durant? And only 69% of people said yes. 31% of people need to get their heads checked. Explain the feeling of anguish that is clearly on your face right now as you double face palm yourself.
I don't know how many times I gotta say this. It's Kevin Durant, man. if it only costs you that, I know everyone loves Gary. I know everyone loves OG. If it only costs you that to get Kevin Durant, you 100% do it. In fact, if the Masai somehow turns down that offer, we need to start a petition to fire Masai if that doesn't get traded. I'm serious. Like it. At that point, yeah, I mean that's like buying a house in Toronto for like $100,000. Okay, like it doesn't even matter what's in that house. Even the land itself is worth it. So no, I mean I don't even think that's not enough. I think there will be another trade that comes that will get a better player, or even just some sort of pick compensation that's better than that.
Yeah.
I think the first 2 that you mentioned are probably the most realistic. I understand why people are really split on the Pascal thing. I think for me, if you are trading for Kevin Durant, like you probably want your most championship-ready players, and Pascal is a championship-proven number 2 option. In fact, he's actually much better than he was the year that he won the championship.
Him and KD fit so well together in theory. Like,
absolutely,
it's perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, it might be, honestly, if the Raptors were able to make this trade and had Kevin Durant and Pascal Siakam, that might be the best 1-2 pairing in the league right now.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, again, people just have to like think, like, not even broaden their minds. You're just like, it's Kevin Durant. And I'm not trying to insult people. I'm just trying to say, like, there's no reason you would say, like, oh, these 2 quality starters for Kevin Durant. Are you kidding me? Anyway, so that's the Pascal argument. I think ideally, you should be doing as much as possible to keep those two guys together. The thing with including Scottie Barnes in the trade is that it wouldn't just be Scottie Barnes. And that's where you get into a territory. It's like, well, because you at least $35 million worth of contracts, no matter what, even if it's a 3-team deal, whatever, the Raptors will have to surrender $35 million worth of contracts at minimum. And that's just straight up for Kevin Durant. If they receive anyone else, they got to send out even more money. Scottie Barnes only makes $7 million next year. So you need to send out an additional $28 million. And of course you could put in some other pieces. I mean, Thad Young's deal apparently is an extension, so apparently you can trade him already. Although it would really be just a big FU to Thad Young, a very quality vet. To be like, hey man, we just signed you, but we're moving you back to Brooklyn. Enjoy.
Yeah, go share the floor with Ben Simmons. Have fun. Yeah.
You just signed the contract. Now you're gonna go to Sean Marks and ask for a buyout, right? But I mean, look, whatever. Like, worst case scenario, maybe you can do that. But even if you do that, you got to put in Kem Birch. The thing is, all those salaries are fine. You're gonna have to include OG or Gary at minimum.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you're looking at, well, I'm probably just giving up too much, period. Like, if it was just Scottie for Kevin Durant and contracts didn't matter, you probably have a much more easier conversation about this. But just because of the extras that you need to add for salary, that's the part for Scottie where it's just like, at that point, is the deal fully worth it, right? So that's where it gets really, really tough to make this trade. And of course, I'm sure from the Raptors side, they're probably trying to sell them on OG plus Gary plus picks. And if I were the Nets, I wouldn't be in a rush to accept that deal, because that deal will be on the table from now until the end of time. So like, they should try to scour the rest of the league for better packages. But I also don't think that this thing is going to be something that happens that quickly. And that's not like any sort of like specific inside information, because God knows podcasters don't have any of that. But you have to just look at the overall situation. Like, we're talking about the Nets, who are definitely in trade conversations for KD. Definitely in trade conversations for Kyrie. And depending on what they want back from those two guys, they're probably also in trade conversations for Ben Simmons as well, just to be able to receive certain players in return. That's a lot to move, man. So I just think that even just like from a logistical standpoint, in terms of how many hours in a day are there, in terms of Sean Marks being on the phone and the rest of the front office evaluating everything, like, there's just so much happening for them at once that it's probably going to take more than like 2 days, 3 days. But that's not going to stop anyone from like refreshing and trying to get as much content out of this as possible. So
no, give me those Woj 45-second clips talking about the Raptors being the obvious easy pairing. I'll do that all day. Please
give me public posturing, please. I need public posturing.
I'm a little piggy, feed me at the trough.
Yes.
I do want to sort of expand upon the OG Trent idea in the next segment, because I put out the idea yesterday, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday's podcast with Vivek, but I think I've grown even more sort of staunch, and this is maybe the way you get it done. I want to talk about the Precious Achiuwa of it all, and whether he could potentially be a bit of a sleeper addition in a deal to get things moving here. We're going to come up with that in just a sec. I also want to talk about KD and just sort of like the personality argument, and that seems to be something that Raptors fans are a little concerned about. We'll talk about that too. But before that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Arcade 1UP. Boom shakalaka. We have big news. The one, the only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1UP is the leader in at-home retro arcade games, and it's not only bringing you the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger and better than ever with a, wait for it, Shaq Edition machine. We all love NBA Jam in these parts. It's the most fun sports game there ever was. It laid the groundwork for all the fun sports games you ever played afterwards, and it's the reason why I don't like Madden or any realistic sports games, because they don't have explosions or fire or anything fun like they have at NBA Jam. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Plus, you can compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, which is super fun. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade1up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1UP is the place for fun. They've got even more classics as well, like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and many others, starting at just $399. What a great gift idea this is. Check it out. They are also giving it away, an NBA Jam Shaq Edition machine. That is 3 of them, to be exact, to Locked On listeners. Enter for a chance to win a game console for whichever room in your your house you want to stick it in, put it in your office, your bedroom, your living room, your kitchen, bathroom, put it in the shower. Who cares? It's the NBA Jam. You'll want to play it no matter where you are at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number one, up.com/lockedon. You've got till July 8th to enter to win your NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out and enter today. And we continue on. Your first listen of the day here with Will Liu of the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590. The Fan, a man who once recorded a podcast with me at my kitchen table in my Christie Pitts apartment. Look at us, Will. Look at us. Doing the exact same thing, just a little further apart. So to pick up on the idea of like the Gary Trent Jr. OG package, which is what people seem to be rooting for. And honestly, based on what the market is, the fact that the DeAndre Ayton thing is very difficult to work with the hard cap and base your compensation and all of that, muddying up what the Suns offer can be. The fact that the Heat honestly have nothing to offer, and I can't believe we keep talking about the Heat as a potential landing spot for KD. How good do we think Tyler Hero actually is? Duncan Robinson is negative value at this point. Stop it. It's ridiculous. There's the Pelicans, I guess, that are in there who could potentially make a move, but maybe they just want to ride with what they've got, and maybe because they've signed Zion Williamson, they don't have that big blue chipper to send back to the Nets. So I kind of think there's a world in which that OG package is kind of the best one that the Nets are going to get. But I put out yesterday the idea of Precious Achiuwa being like a sweetener to a KD deal, to make that package work, to keep Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam out of the potential offer for KD. And I got a little pushback being like, oh no, the depth would be hurt too much. I really, really hate when depth is brought up as like a concern. They'll figure it out. What are your thoughts on Precious Achiuwa as a potential sweetener? Does it take away too much defensive equity from the team? Does it make them too thin? Like it leaves you with a big four of Fred, Scottie, Pascal, and KD with Boucher, Thad, Otto Porter, whoever else you want off the bench. It is a little thin, but also Kevin Durant's on your team in that situation, which again should not be underrated. He's really, really good at basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I would try to make the conversation about, do you want Precious Achiuwa or do you want another pick?
Right.
I would try to sell them on another pick just because, I mean, look, I think there is some merit to that because you are taking away 3 rotation players at that point, which is fine. Again, it's Kevin Durant, but I would try to say to the Nets, would you rather have this or like a 2029 first round pick when you have no idea? Maybe the Raptors are bad at that point, right? And yeah, because I think honestly, you make that trade if you're trading OG and Gary out. Like I think Precious has a really good chance to be starting for that team, and so the way I'm looking at it is almost you're trading 3 starters for Kevin, and I think that the whole idea of trading for him is that you need to have enough left over. And I think if you do trade OG, like the natural replacement for what he does is probably Precious. Now, Precious is not as good as OG right now. Definitely not the same level of three-point shooter, but defensively, he's there in terms of rebounding. He's there in terms of serving that 3-and-D role. He's there being able to guard some bigs and stuff like that. Obviously, he has that as an advantage over OG. OG's probably better at guarding wings and stuff, but still, I think you need to hold on to Precious. But again, if the Nets say there's no deal unless Precious is involved, I'm sorry, man. It's Kevin Durant again. Like there's just the singular gravity of how good Kevin is. Like I think you need to consider this. And I know people are like hesitant for one reason or another, and we'll talk about that. But like you have to ask yourself. So the Raptors' whole method of operation is that they draft players, they develop them, increase their value to the team while also increasing their skill set so that they have more value as free agents eventually down the line and get paid more money. And they either do that or they trade some of those assets in for disgruntled stars, because we know star players, when they're looking at free agency, are not looking at the Raptors. That's why the Raptors never operate as a cap team. They never really try to make all that happen. They are always in the market to trade for disgruntled stars. Kawhi was the classic example. Now, this is not going to be as good of a deal as the Kawhi trade. You can't always chase that, man. The Kawhi trade is like an all-time trade, right? You get him for pennies on the dollar because he came off of an injury-prone year and he was unhappy and he was very clear he wanted to go to the Clippers, and he did ultimately go to the Clippers. But, of course, the Raptors swooped in and got him at the right time, and obviously it worked out as the best time of your life. Kevin Durant is obviously is asking for a trade, and the Nets probably need to trade him, but also at the same time, they have a lot more leverage in the situation. He has 4 years on his contract, and also Kevin Durant's a better player than Kawhi Leonard, so you need to give up more assets for him. That's okay. But, like, the thing is, you know what? If you ultimately don't like the Pascal trade, If you don't like the Scottie Barnes trade, I don't blame you. It's fine. I'm totally fine with rolling it back. The thing is, if you are saying no to Kevin Durant, then you have to ask yourself, what would need to be available? Who would need to be available under what circumstances, with how many years on their contract, with what injury history, with how happy they are, with how young they are, all this other stuff, how much team control they have. What would need to happen for you to be willing to make that kind of trade? Because we know that's how the Raptors operate. They only do one of these two things. And if Kevin Durant with 4 years on his deal, with no injury right now, is something that you are saying no to, you have to ask yourself as a fan, who would I actually say yes to? Because if it's nobody,
it's SGA, of course.
Great. I mean, look, I like Shea too, but like, come on, man.
Yeah, he's not Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant, as we've discussed. Yeah, I think that's a pretty well-made point. And honestly, like I've said this before, I think it really does just come down to like your philosophy of what you want in the basketball team you watch. And you know, if you are someone who's okay with having a lower set of title equity and, you know, potential of not winning a title, and you just want to watch good, fun basketball with cool guys who you root for, then yeah, I totally buy the idea of not wanting to go trade for Kevin Durant, because bringing in Kevin Durant brings all of the expectation and stakes and heaviness that having a Kevin Durant on your team brings. I also don't think anyone is like looking to not ever feel what they felt in 2019 again. I think I'm a little bit more patient just because like that happened 3 years ago. I'm still like kind of riding pretty good off of that. Like, you know, I don't necessarily need the Raptors to go jump into something right now, but if the price is right, yeah, obviously you trade for Kevin Durant. And maybe even if the price is wrong and it's a little too much. I am curious like what you think about the whole like locker room stuff with Kevin Durant, because a big concern a lot of folks have, you know, that I've kind of seen just sort of talking about this in various platforms, comments, replies, stuff like that is, well, he's not a leader. He's going to, you know, cause the locker room to sort of fall apart because he does that everywhere he goes. I don't really buy that. Like, he was fine in the Warriors. The Warriors had super team problems that pretty much every super team has, and they still won titles. Yeah, him and Draymond screamed at each other, but I don't think it was like, obviously it didn't derail them to the point that they couldn't go and win titles or anything like that. When it comes to the Nets, like, yeah, not great so far, but also he hitched his wagon to Kyrie Irving, who will decidedly not be on the Toronto Raptors if he ends up on the Toronto Raptors. I suppose there's the concern that he wouldn't want to be in Toronto and might agitate for a trade. I just feel like Kevin Durant can't really afford to do that now, just like legacy-wise. Maybe he also doesn't care about that stuff, and maybe like you have to sort of weigh that too. Like, does he even care about what the sort of opinion of him is from the outside? Where are you at on the idea of Kevin Durant sort of, you know, being a no-go simply because it might make the vibes a little too dour?
Yeah, okay, so number one, none of us know him at all. And like, that's the thing. People are forming their opinions on someone they don't know. Now, based off, obviously there's lots of reporting. Obviously, he has his own podcast. He's obviously been on your TV quite a bit. So you know something about him. You have an impression about him, but you really don't know for sure. That's just the one thing that we have to make clear at the very start of this.
Totally.
Because this is not like talking about trade value. This is not like talking about like how good a player is. This is just like speculating on who a person is, which we really don't know. To me, I'm thinking about a couple things. Number one, he was a really good teammate in OKC.
Yep.
He was a really, I don't really think he was the source of the problem in Brooklyn. He probably asked for some team control because that's just pretty standard for star players, especially.
Yeah, it's Kevin Durant. Of course you do that.
But it's like, yeah, I mean, you know, but like, I don't know if he had like abused it in a way that's like detrimental to your team. If you want to say that he hitched his wagon to Kyrie Irving and that's the way he abused it, I mean, honestly, like any team in the NBA was going to be willing to sign those two guys at that current given time. I would say that a lot of what happened to the Nets this past year or the last couple of years was mostly Kyrie driven. And that's not to shift the blame. That's also just like he didn't take the vaccine and it really just derailed their whole season.
The front office also handled it terribly as well. Like that was total.
They shouldn't have brought him back.
No,
they shouldn't have brought him back. They should have held firm with their line. But whatever, right? It's more Kyrie, I think, to me than Kevin, just based on all the facts and evidence that have come out of that thing. he was a malcontent with the Warriors in the sense that like he didn't get what he wanted out of that situation, which is strange to say because he did win 2 Finals MVPs and 2 championships.
Sure.
But towards the end of that, the reports are very clear that he just wasn't talking to teammates at a certain point, and he did grow dissatisfied. He didn't really have the personality fit with some of those guys on the team. That's fine. And like if he wants to trade down the line, I agree with you. It would be bad for his legacy because like if you just look at overall, like his career, for as talented and as honestly as accomplished as he is, it's a little underwhelming to think about if you re-roll the dice on Kevin Durant's entire NBA career.
Yeah.
I think this might be one of the more underwhelming outcomes, even though he's spectacular. So you definitely want him to land in a good situation. I mean, he could still ask for a trade in the future. You never know. He might just live this life of like an NBA mercenary or whatever. But like, I think you got to think long term a little bit in terms of who do you want to go in the Hall of Fame with? Who are the people that are going to be in your corner when you retire and stuff like that? And I think just like most people would kind of care to some degree about that. Maybe that's not everything, but they would kind of care about it. And yeah, I mean, and again, worst case scenario, he asked for another trade. Big deal. You can get a huge haul back for Kevin Durant because he's on a 4-year contract. So unless he's like had the most devastating injuries possible, he'll be fine. And by the way, he's come back perfectly fine from an Achilles tear and a Jones fracture in his foot. Like those are two of the absolute worst injuries you can imagine for an NBA player, outside of like the really like gruesome like Sean Livingston type of injuries. Like and he's shown that he's able to come back from that kind of stuff. So I mean, like the downside is still fairly limited. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I mean, make this trade, man. Just get it done.
Yeah, I think I'm less concerned about the sort of like personality fit too. Again, you're right. We don't know Kevin Durant, and we're drawing all sorts of assumptions, which is probably unfair. It's kind of what you got to go on when you're sort of theorizing this stuff, and it's all part of the game, I suppose. But I also think like if any team has ever been equipped to welcome in a dissatisfied star and make it work, it's probably the team that did it with Kawhi Leonard under probably even more uncertain circumstances, considering his contract situation, the fact that they just traded away DeMar freaking DeRozan to do it, and the fact that they were really, it seemed, 1 year away from a full-on teardown. There were plenty of rumblings of discontent that season, and they still managed to kind of make it work. And, I feel like Fred VanVleet's probably a pretty good guy to have in that room. If they have Pascal Siakam around, it's a pretty good guy to have in that room. Earl Watson seems like a pretty good guy to sort of
former
manage things on the side. Yeah, good dear pal. Why is that? Did I do it right?
Adrian Griffin as well, I think, actually.
Yeah. So I think there's lots of infrastructure in place to make it so that you could probably welcome in KD and not have the sort of toxic personality concerns that a lot of folks seem to be concerned about. Again, no Kyrie Irving on the team seems like probably a good way to make it happen. We're going to continue on. We're going to leave the KD stuff for now and just kind of pick Will's brain a little bit on the other offseason stuff for the Raptors. Bringing back Thad, bringing back Boucher, signing Otto Porter. We'll get to that in just 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline.net, who are your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, and including, of course, Kevin Durant odds. That is the thing everyone's worried about right now. I think the Raptors are currently plus 200 to land Kevin Durant, which is not very good value, I guess, but it does speak to this being very much on the table. So if you want to throw some money down on the Raptors getting Kevin Durant or any other bet, you can go to betonline.net for all your scores, podcasts, injury reports, news, everything you might need to be the informed wagerer. And they have all your favorite sports and big-time events as well, including MMA, boxing, golf tournaments, Wimbledon. It's all there. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline is where the game starts. And we round out your first listen of the day here with William Liu of the Raptors Show. Leaving behind KD talk until tomorrow, where we're going to do a crossover with Adam from Locked On Nets, and that'll be a great time. But let's just sort of take a bigger picture of the offseason look here, Will. Obviously things are still in limbo. We don't know what the hell the final result is going to be, whether they get Durant, whether they get Ayton in some sort of weird three-teamer. That's all still on the table. But as it stands right now, I've kind of made the point that if this is all that happens this offseason, it's kind of perfect and you're totally happy with what's gone down. If a KD trade can't materialize, just bringing back Thad and Boucher, I thought was priority number one. Finding some sort of shooting off the bench, I thought was priority number two. And they got both of those things taken care of. What's your sort of overall grade and view on what the Raptors have done so far this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, putting aside the potential of trading for Kevin Durant, this is like pretty much the offseason that you expected. I think there was some worry coming into the offseason that Chris Boucher is coming off a really good year.
Yep.
And I could see some teams sort of giving him more term. The Raptors ultimately gave him 3 guaranteed years, which is good for both sides. The contract number was slightly higher than the mid-level. Great deal all around. A guy who's hardworking, wants to come back, came back. Great for your team culture.
Look at you
Congrats to
sucking
Chris.
up to Chris Boucher.
Listen, man,
Unbelievable.
all you got to do to win my affection as a Raptor fan is just play good basketball and not bite a pump fakes. Number 2, Thad Young coming back on that deal. I think it was really important for them to make a deal that was able to create a financial asset.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's the other part too, which is not to dismiss his abilities as a player or his impact on the locker room. All that stuff is really good, and I think he fits the team. He can still play. Obviously, has great chemistry. Him and Chris Boucher, by the way, I'm looking forward to seeing more of those backdoor cuts
hell yeah.
and the passes and everything like that. The great connection last year. The thing is, you wanted to create some sort of like financial flexibility with this, because you get into a situation where one of the issues the Lakers have, not to make everything about the Lakers, is that they don't have any tradable contracts, and not just like contracts that have value, contracts that have money on them. They're literal. If you look at their salary page, it's like Russell Westbrook for $47 million, LeBron for $44 million, and then like AD for like $38 million or something like that. And then after that, it's THT who makes 10, and like everyone else makes the minimum. So it's really hard to actually add things to your salary. You need to have contracts on your books that's flexible, that's appealing. And on top of that, so not only is that fulfills that portion, but the second year is only guaranteed for $1 million, which makes it now an expiring deal that you can trade around the time of the draft or something like that, take on some salary, keep your salary flexible, but also at the same time get something in return. So just a really good bit of business. And then Otto Porter Jr., I don't know how they convinced him to come with just slightly over the taxpayer mid-level. I'm really surprised, because I thought he was a pretty good free agent. I thought the Warriors would just retain him, to be honest. But guy who shoots the three really well, almost career 39% shooter. You needed somebody to be able to capitalize off of kickouts and stuff like that. And I don't think he'll be like gunning off the bench in the same way that like CJ Miles was back in the day, but you needed somebody off the bench who could actually shoot, and you need some injury insurance for OG Anunoby, and you have that. So I think it fits nicely. Obviously, you don't have long-term deep control over him, but he's a good player to have, smart player to have, and fits the 6'9" identity as well. So there's really nothing to dislike about the offseason. It's exactly kind of what you expected. They got Christian Koloko too, which I thought was a really nice move for them. And if they get Kevin Durant, then again, we need to build Masai a shrine or a statue, or just start like a whole religion over him, man. Like, can we do that?
Yeah, I've made the point that if he ends up pulling off some sort of heist here, he should maybe just retire, because it ain't getting better than that. It would suck for us.
Oh, he hasn't got Giannis yet, man. Come on.
That's true.
He's got to get the 3 greatest small forwards of this generation outside of LeBron. So
I wouldn't put it past him. He's a maniac.
I wouldn't put it past him either.
So I'm curious. I've kind of theorized about this on the show, and I'm curious sort of what your view is, because I think there's lots of different sort of visions for what the team can look like next year with the personnel they have, what they kind of showed off last year. I'm kind of curious, now that they have this sort of, top 8, you would figure, I would assume we're going to see at least an opportunity for Malachi Flynn to like maybe finally at last get some, I don't believe in it necessarily, but like there's probably going to be some room there. I see you wincing, and I don't blame you at all. I would assume we're going to see Delano Banton or Justin Champagnie get some run, and obviously Ken Burch is still hanging around too. We always forget about him. Like, oh, this kind of serviceable backup center is just like hanging around on the roster. Yeah. What's your sort of ideal vision for like the way the team is constructed, the hierarchy that we see, even like the starting lineups, the closing lineups? Like, do you have like a grand vision for what next season should look like? Because I think because of the sort of maneuverability of the roster and the skill sets and kind of how they overlap and complement one another, I think there's lots of different ways that you can kind of envision what this team looks like, and it kind of be the right answer.
Yeah, that's actually the nice thing, is that I don't think, if again, assuming the KD trade doesn't happen and you just keep the roster, and then the front office says, "What do you mean KD trade? We didn't do anything. We were very happy with that team, and we had no conversations, right?"
Yeah, that reporting was never coming from us.
Yeah, exactly. And technically they haven't, right?
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I think that's one of the nice things. You actually have your whole like style of play and hierarchy, everything figured out.
Yeah.
I think that was for the Raptors last year. In addition to Pascal coming back off of injury and missing the start of the season, obviously he was your best player. You just had to figure out role definition for everybody. There was Precious at the start of the year was just like a really, really tough on offense, man. Like, I don't know what he was doing. Chris Boucher was like trying to play like Kevin Durant, and it was just not working for him. Obviously, he took that Boxing Day game against the Cavs where he was like, this is the number one option thing is not cut out for me. I need to be a role player. And it obviously turned his career around, and he got paid nicely because of it. There was just so much like searching for your role. Spee was playing, Utah was playing, Champagny was playing. Like, there was just so much like Delano was playing. Like, there was just so much of like what's going on. I think towards the end of the season, they really figured out what the pecking order is, and they really know their style of play. And I think that if they don't make this Kevin deal, they just bring that team back and they hit the ground running. And that's going to be the biggest difference as compared to last year. They don't need to figure all this other stuff out. I don't think they change the starting five. I still like to see a little bit more balance. Like, I honestly would love to see Precious get into the starting five and then maybe someone like Gary coming off the bench. But, like, it's so hard to sell that to Gary on a contract year for him.
Is it,
after
though?
a year,
Can't you just be like, you're better than Tyler Hero, go win 6 Man of the Year? Like, I feel like
I don't think
that.
who's aspiring to win 6 Man of the Year though. Like,
People with
like
a gunner's spirit, much like Gary Trent Jr. That is the gunner's award, baby.
He'll be like, I could gun with the starting five as well. And I could probably get better looks from the starting five. I think it's just like he had a really good year, better than what anyone could have reasonably expected out of Gary last year. And so how are you really going to – I mean, I guess you could sell it to him by just saying you're doing this. I don't care. But I don't think you want to sour that relationship
games in this iteration too, I would say. Like, if you put him on the bench, he can still close and play 30-plus minutes.
Yeah, I know. But, like, again, players are weird about starting, man. And, again, he's young in his career. This is not like asking a veteran to come off the bench or something like that. Like, I think that's a lot easier for guys who have made their money and all that stuff. It's just I would be a hard sell, but I also don't think the upside is like so significant that you would sell it to them that effectively. But in any case, though, like the Raptors are in a good spot, man. Like, I mean, I keep going back to this, but like the only team in the calendar year of 2022 in the Eastern Conference that had more wins than the Raptors was the Celtics, who had a 24-3 stretch at one point during that second half of the season, and they finished with one more win than the Raptors, at least in the calendar year of 2022. So, like, we're talking about January 1st to April when the season ended, regular season. So they're in a good spot, man. They just need to continue playing that way. I think they're growing really nicely, and that's probably why most people are, well, not most people, a lot of people are very hesitant to make any kind of deal at this current time, is because they saw what happened in the second half of last season. They're very intrigued and seduced by it, and they just want to keep seeing it continue. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea specifically, even though I was brought on this podcast specifically to argue for Kevin Durant. And my case for Kevin Durant is that it's Kevin Durant. He averaged 30 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists last year with a steal and a block. Are you kidding me, man? Oh my God! Yeah. Imagine having Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard on your team in the span of 3 years. I'm just saying, it's on the table.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's Kevin Durant. I know the title of today's podcast. It's Kevin Durant.
Yes,
it's ridiculous. I think kind of what you laid out there. The reasons why I'm like cool if they don't pull off a deal is because I think they're in a good spot and there's like a building thing going on here. But again, none of that's guaranteed. And you might go into next season thinking that Gary Trent Jr. is going to take a step or that Precious Achiuwa is going to take a step, and that's not always going to happen. And then you'll be sitting there thinking, damn, wish you had traded those guys off for literally Kevin Durant. It's a very enviable spot to be, though, because they are not under pressure to do anything. And I think that's ultimately why I don't think Scottie Barnes is going to be included in a deal. And honestly, if Scottie Barnes is not in a deal, I can get on board with anything else, even though the Pascal thing would crush me and probably leave behind a team that's not quite ready to compete for a title, barring some crazy second-year leap from Scottie. I think you can make
which
it.
Is possible, by the way. We can't discount that.
Totally.
Like, I think people have made this point that like the year that the Raptors won the title, they didn't have a number 2 option either, right? Yeah. Kyle was not a number 2 option.
Yeah,
he had the ball and he was a point guard, but he was not the number 2 option. He averaged.
He was dad. He was
points.
Team Dad. Yeah,
he was team dad, and he was like one of those like dad left for cigarettes type of dads. Because like, remember how much of a pain Kyle Lowry was to deal with. You remember that whole season, right? Masai had to sit him down and was like, yo, I'll trade you for Mike Conley right now. If you don't shape up and win this championship for us, man. Stop being like, I'm mad about DeMar. Grow up. You have Kawhi on the team. You're about to win a championship. You're about to cement your status as the number one option, as the number one Raptor of all time with this title. You're about to have all-time legacy here. You're about to have a crypto commercial. That's what's on the line. Do you want to go to Utah or do you want to go to Memphis? Like, honestly, I think that's probably what Masai said word for word to Kyle at that point. But it's like, you know, they didn't have a number two option at that point either. Pascal's come off a season where he averaged 7 points per game. They traded for Kawhi with only 1 year. And guess what? The opportunity was left open, and Pascal took it and ran with it, and he became that one most improved player. And by the way, I mean, like, Scottie's coming off a rookie season where he won Rookie of the Year, 16 points per game. Like, how much of a jump would it be for him to jump into the number two option, especially if they're giving so much attention to a guy like Kevin Durant? Like, you have to think about these things. I think it's possible for him. But yeah, I mean, man, I think probably for us in the media too, we have to acknowledge that we're a little bit biased, because if we get Kevin Durant on the team, I'm not kidding, you and I will be doing a podcast every single day about Kevin Durant, and people will be listening like crazy. So I think we're biased from like a career perspective too. I just want to admit that bias too. You know,
I want all of my Raptors podcasting friends to get richer, baby. That's all I want.
That's exactly it, man. Trust me, Kawhi being here honestly earned us some money. Like, for real, I think it translated to financial benefits for us.
Dog, they got me to write a book. The guy who doesn't write good. I
have that book. Yeah,
it's good
I
for
got
business,
it for free
baby.
from Alex, but you know.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm gonna have to talk to Alex about that one. Just to kind of seal it all up. I know we said we were gonna not talk about Kevin Durant this segment, but guess what? Sorry. The idea of also keeping Scottie and getting KD in the door is, even if it's a Pascal deal, which again, that's like a more emotionally charged thing than it is like a basketball argument I can make against it, because Kevin Durant's better than Pascal Siakam. I just like Pascal Siakam more as a dude, and you know, that's just kind of where I'm at. But if you get Scottie Barnes still on the team with KD, it doesn't have to be about next season, right? Like, you got 4 years of Kevin Durant. Like, you can have this thing build a little bit. It doesn't have to be that the team is a finished product next year. And if it's Pascal and all the picks, you still have OG, you still have Trent. Like, there's a pretty good supporting cast there, even if there's no clear number two just yet, until Scottie does take that jump. But that jump is probably coming sometime over the course of KD's contract, and it might be that Scottie Barnes by the end of KD's contract is just the best player on the team, and that's pretty awesome too if your second best player is literally Kevin Durant. So I think we've made a pretty compelling case in favor of why the Raptors should be pretty aggressive about this. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just really fun to talk about all the different angles, and we'll continue to do that all week here on the show, but we'll wrap it there. Will, anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
Cover story in stores now. Get it. I did not plan this, but I realized halfway through the episode that
I have it here too, right here.
Oh wow, what? Yeah,
look at this. The second best book Alex Wong has ever been part of. The second
exactly.
best. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah. Otherwise, you know, just appreciate you having me on. Obviously, this is a great tradition that we've had going on for honestly 7 years.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Although I've never gotten the invite for the Raptors show, and I have Alex's
book.
Wow. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. This is unbelievable. But
well, you got to talk to Alex. He's the producer. I'm big time now. I don't have to produce my own shit. You know,
you don't deal with talent.
Talk to my producer. Yeah. It's the ultimate bailout too. You know.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I'll bully Alex into letting me on your show. That'll be satisfying. Just the sympathy invite. That'll feel really good. Anyway, Will, thanks so much, man. It's great talking to you. Thanks to the good people out there for listening and supporting the show. Please subscribe on YouTube and all your favorite apps for free. It's lovely when you do that. Go make your second listen of the day Locked On Nets, as they're breaking it all down as it's all melting there in Brooklyn with our pals Adam and Doug over on that podcast. Adam will be on tomorrow's show, which should be a lot of fun, as we'll kind of get the lowdown on where the Nets kind of sit in all of this. But until then, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you Thursday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye.